Welcome to Overanalyzing Houseki no Kuni because a new chapter won't release for another couple of months. Spoilers for up to 105 because that is what's out right now and that's all that I've read to. And if you have any other additional observations or analyses, leave them in the comments because I will read them all. All right, so right off the bat, I want to talk about how the last chapter ended with Phos looking out into the ocean, looking at stuff beyond the school, and where meanwhile Euclid, who kind of becomes Phos's kind of I forgot antagonist, like kind of Phos's antagonist later on in the story, uh, is facing inwards towards the school. I don't know if I'm overanalyzing. That's the point of the series, but I find it interesting that this ends with Phos looking out to other places beyond where Phos has grown up, and Euclid is looking in at the school, the building, and it's a lot more confining space. All right, so Euclid is going to go over to talk to Rutile, and they're going to have some great conversations. Oh, Euclid, sorry to bother you. So Euclid is talking about how they need to go to the pond, giving reasons for that. Um, thanks for telling me before jumping in. Like maybe not before, not someone else didn't do that. Anyway, so it talks about here how they can't sense temperature that well, or like other things, and um, uh, oh wait, well, oh yeah, you're responsible. You're so responsible, says Rutile. And Yuka says wow really when Rutile talks about the temperature because they don't sense temperature that well. And I think this is also building up the like contrasting Phos and Euclid for a bit. And I haven't really thought about Euclid as a foil to Phos in this moment, but like Rutile is saying how responsible Euclid is, and another thing is that let me move this. So another thing is that there's embroidery on the inside of all their clothes, and I did not really think about that until I read it in the like lore-ish book that came out. And the embroidery is special for the gems on winter duty. And another thing is that their clothes are like black and white, so their clothes aren't that interesting of colors. They can make yellow clothes, but not that much. That's why Yellow Diamond has yellow gloves and yellow socks. But for the most part, they just have black and white for their clothing. But if you look here, there is like colorful embroidery on the inside of their clothes just because they can dye the thread. And they put extra care to the ones on winter duty because, they do a lot for them while all the other gems are asleep. Which I just didn't know that and didn't think about that until I thought about it, or until it was outlined in the other book. So I just wanted to point that out for if none of you knew that. But yeah, and I think that's actually kind of sweet that the characters embroider stuff inside the clothes. Like it's not seen, but it's just to show like the amount of quality and care they put towards uh each other and what they do. It's so peaceful these last 2 days. Um, so it's interesting here because Euclid talks about how it's peaceful, and Rutile talks about how Sensei's been restless. Kind of seeing how like those are different because Euclid is like it's been peaceful, and Sensei's having an anxiety attack over 2 Lunarian attacks in one day. Um, and then Euclid says, in the 2,173 years I've been around, they've come an average of once every 3 days in clear weather. I wonder if something changed. And we know it has changed. Because the thing that has changed is the catalyst for the entire story, which is Phos existing, just existing. And the it's something that as we read the story we don't think it's that different, but to these characters it is. So here we have Yuko saying that it's strange because it's strange to them because they've just had normal Lunarian attacks for like as long as Euclid has been alive, like 2,000 years. And the reason why the Lunarian attacks are changing is because now Phos exists, and now they're going to use Phos as a catalyst, to turn Phos into a human. That's the plot of the show. And it's cool to see that like we get hints of that at the beginning, but it's not something we fully realize until later. about how weird the Lunarian attacks were getting, like with the dog. And it makes this story more interesting because it would be kind of boring to go through all those years and have all the Lunarian attacks be the same. And that's why we're doing it from Phos's perspective, because it's the most interesting perspective in the show. Uh, so, there's bugs. And then Euclid is kind of realizing, like what I said before, about how they don't sense things a lot like animals do. Um, Not as bright as we look, because I think Euclid didn't sense why the bees were flying away. We're not sensitive with plants. We don't notice how hot it is in the summer or cold in winter, and we can't sense danger like the insects. Do you think we have our immortality to blame for that? And then Rutile takes it in a more positive way. It's thanks to it that we don't have to be scared of a little change. So I find this line funny just because, of course, we know that Phos goes through a lot of changes, and those changes are a little bit scary, or at least in that sense. And it's interesting that Rutile sees it as a positive thing, and Yuko sees it as a more negative thing. Uh, and I think that also shows like how Rutile has been sort of like trying so many things. Like I don't know. I wonder if this has something to say about Rutile and Euclid's character, like their differences as well. Just that Euclid is saying that like maybe Euclid would want to have more feeling like the animals do, and Rutile is like, nah, bro. Anyway, I'm a little scared I break more easily than everyone else. By the way, the resin, yeah, about that. So, if we go back to here, the character introductions, we see that Euclid is a, where are you, Euclid? Euclid is a 7.5 on the hardness scale. Phos is a 3.5. Phos is half, like a little less than half of Euclid's hardness, and Euclid is the one who's worried about breaking if they go into the lake, let alone the ocean. And so it kind of shows like if I'm saying that Euclid is shown as more of a foil here for Phos, it shows that one, Euclid is very responsible, which Phos is not. Euclid is also the secretary to the president, but we all know that Euclid makes a lot of the impactful decisions in the culture. Euclid is very important to the society compared to Phos, who's not. And Euclid uh, Euclid has an important role and feels needed by the gems. And because of that, Euclid is afraid of breaking, unlike Phos. Because Euclid knows that there would be a lot of problems if Euclid were to get taken to the moon, if they were to break randomly. And the characters would care. This kind of sounds harsh. The characters would care a lot more if Euclid were to break apart than Phos, because, well, Phos already breaks all the time, but because Euclid contributes more to the society than Phos, and that's kind of sad to see. It is a thing of use, and that's kind of what Phos gets out later when Phos has their last conversation with Cinnabar. But that's how it is, and that's why Euclid is more cautious. And then they find out that Phos may have taken the resin or stuff like that. Another thing I just want to note here is just that because of the way the characters are set up, Ichikawa doesn't really have to censor anything in terms of no-show organs. And also, I often think about how this show series would be so gory if the characters had organs, but good thing they don't, I guess. Or maybe not, I don't know. But we get some great rock-shattering visual ASMR, I don't know. So yeah, then Red Barrel is like, I'm looking for my suit. I wonder where it went. And then boom, Phos has it. Of course, Phos has it. The tag's different. Blah 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 blah. So here, Phos is like, preparing to go in this state. You've been laying that since yesterday. Showing that Phos is like at least being cautious that they. Well, I think they would just die if they didn't do any preparation for the ocean. I mean, die quotes. Break apart. Just hold on. If I come off my power and you won't stand the side of me, and it's not good to soak in salt water. So I think this is another indication of how Phos values their looks, which they don't value later. Like Phos is saying here that like, oh, Ventricosus won't stand the side of Phos, seeing that Phos thinks about that, like how they look towards others. And meanwhile, later on, Phos does not give a crap. Liquid, what did I call it? I need to make a video on like just giving Phos like weird nicknames for all their different stages. But close to the end, what do I call it? Liquid Gremlin Phos is what I call the one where it's just like the gold just holding all the broken pieces together. A very lovely sight. I'm sure you all remember. um, it takes a certain amount of preparation to go deep sea diving, and they're like, "Excuse me." Do you have Sensei's permission? Rutile's like, please don't do that. I don't want to work all night. Uh, um, maybe I should make Red Barrel is thinking about other things. Red Barrel is great. Anyway, then we have Sensei looking down on Phos and saying, I won't allow it. It will help my natural history. Phos is like, yeah. And here we see like Phos bowing down to him, and he's like, I would only, but you keep my mouth. And he's telling Phos to go look for what's in front of them. And like I said before, I think I've mentioned this analysis before, but this is a time where he's facing the other way towards Phos. Maybe showing that like Phos is getting further away from becoming like Congo. I don't know. Analyze it however you like. Oh yeah, this scene. So another thing I want to take note of is still Phos is angled lower in the frame than at least all the gems here, except here, because Red Barrel is checking the sleeves, and Congo. But that changes later, because I was rereading this for make the rest of the videos, and I'll get into it. It's just so good. But Ventricosis is for now the only one who's lower than Phos in the frame. Finish my survey on the hills, blah 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 blah. That'll take years. What if something happens to Cinnabar before I'm done? And so this is interesting because it shows that Phos sees Cinnabar's situation as time sensitive. Phos doesn't want Cinnabar to go to the moon, and Phos believes that Cinnabar can be taken at any time. And so because of that, Phos has put time sensitivity to this situation, which Adamant has not done. Adamant Congo, like I said, I use all his names, but Congo hasn't. Sorry, Congo has not been time sensitive to Cinnabar's situation, and it shows that that's probably because of Cinnabar has become more vulnerable with Phos, with telling Phos how they actually feel. But this also means for the first time in Phos's 300 years, Phos actually has to think about getting something done in a reasonable time frame. What's up? Why the weird noises? Oh well, so this is. I'm pretty sure Ventricosis is fine here. I'm gonna be honest. It could be, but Ventricosis, has to get Phos away from all the gems, and lure Phos away. So, my stamina is failing. Oh yeah, animals can survive on light. They need food too. And different animals require different. Your Majesty, and we think that the Ventricosis is dead, but they're fine. Oops, must have dozed off. My stamina is failing. And this is just again, Ventricosis is like really stressing that like Phos needs to do it, and I think this actually kind of mimics Cinnabar's situation as well. Not the guilt tripping part, but the part that like Phos was just talking about Cinnabar and how it's time sensitive, where now Ventricosis is saying like, oh, if they don't go back to their homeland, they might die because of lack of resources or something. It shows that like Phos, and of course it's going to the moon for Cinnabar is like, at least at this point in the story, going to the moon is like death to the gems, and so it's actually the same thing. I didn't see this before, but Ventricosis is saying like, oh, I might die soon if I don't go, and Phos doesn't want that, so Phos is going to follow through. And maybe Ventricosis saw that or knew that, and is using that to their advantage to lure Phos away. Is that in this chapter? It is. So it's kind of like goes back to this where I care about Cinnabar, but I care about you too. So I didn't realize this before, but it's in the same way. Because Phos is helping Cinnabar by trying to find like a purpose for them in the ocean, but they're also helping Ventricosis because they don't want Ventricosis to die, and they don't want Cinnabar to go to the moon. And so it's kind of hitting two birds in one stone. Um, uh, what is death? Is it like when someone's really sleepy or like they can't move or something? Intriguing question. I suppose it means to no longer be. But even if you can't see them, they're still somewhere, right? Because that's how Phos sees death, is that they're just on the moon. No, they're not anywhere, and they will never be found, and they won't hear me, when if I call, not even if you call them my name. Once when someone is dead, they don't ever. When someone is dead, they don't even know who they are anymore. However, in exchange for taking everything away, death gives life value. It's not such a terrible thing. So what's interesting about this is this line. They don't even know who they are anymore. And there's like theories that like this story or Foss's journey is supposed to symbolize like not a physical death, but like a theosophical death, I guess. Because if you look at Foss now, this is still Foss, where they don't have any major limbs missing. If you look at Foss now, are they still alive in the end? Like the Phos as they are at this present, are they still alive or are they different? And that's like a big like part of the story is if you think that way or not. And Phos is the confusing thing about Phos is that Phos never changes their name if and they won't hear me if I call. And like that makes it so much more confusing because with Ghost with Ghost, Cairngorm, and Welligato, when I say those words, these Ghost, Cairngorm, and Welligato are technically the same character. They're technically the same gem. But when I give you the different names of Ghost, Cairngorm, and Welligato, then you know that Ghost is, when they were all together with Ghost and Cairngorm. And then there was Cairngorm, who was more Cairngorm dominant and a little bit of Ghost. And then later, they are still called Cairngorm when Ghost is fully removed. And then you have Welligato, who is the Lunarian version of Cairngorm. And so, but with those different names, you can see like the death of one person, the death of an amalgamation of identity crisis, and and the birth of like a different character. That's why they're given different names. Is because they're seen as different, and that's why when Ghost went to the moon, it was seen as a sword of death to the gems, even though physically the same gem is still there. And so we see that through that change, they were able to give Cairngorm a new name so that it really symbolizes that thing. But because Phos has the same name throughout the series, it doesn't carry it feels different because we call Phos still at the very end when they look completely different, when their personality is completely changed. And it's why it's so much different to, is this Phos still alive or did this Phos die? Because they don't even know who they are anymore. And Phos at the end of the story doesn't know what they're doing. Like, the first lines after Phos crushes Cinnabar is, what am I even doing? And that line, like, is that symbolizing a death of this character? And is the character we're following a new character? And that's a lot of what the story is about. Like, you guys already know that. But, that's what it's talking about. Because think about it this way. Antark is now alive. You know this. If this were to happen, which it won't in the story, because we all know what happens. But when Antark came back as a Lunarian, what would happen if Antark saw Phos again? Like, what would happen? Would Antark call Phos's name and would see this Phos? And no, it wouldn't. And so this is what this is kind of foreshadowing or playing into. Another thing is that along with the name thing, I remember specifically, maybe it was a translation thing because I think this isn't the official translation. I don't remember what the official translation says. But when Congo has puts back all the gems and they choose Euclid as like the new leader basically, Congo says they should follow the gem formerly known as Phos and it kind of shows that like he has to specify because Phos has changed so much, you know? Anyway, let's get on. But it's still kind of sad, indeed, but it's unavoidable. I wasn't lying when I said there were creatures like you in the sea, but the truth is I was hoping to see my home. I was prepared never to return. No matter how much has been taken, how ravaged it's been, even with no one left, I can't help but want to see it. I kind of wonder if this relates to Phos later in the series. It might not, though. Because no matter how much has been taken, how ravaged it's been, even with no one left, I can't help but want to see it. Do you think Phos feels that way at the end of the story? Like looking back at the school, do you think that Phos, like we don't know what memories Phos has, but like does Phos look back and think about how much they still appreciate that place despite all the everything that's happened, or do they still look on it with sadness, you know? And I was never prepared to the return. It's kind of like Phos when they went to the moon. They wanted to return, but I don't know. I guess Phos was prepared to return. I don't know. Are you quite sure? What choice do I have? Sensei told me to start with what's in front of me. I care about Cinnabar, but I care about you too, Your Majesty. So this is what I was saying before, is that I didn't realize how Ventricosis' situation and Cinnabar's situation are similar in the fact that Cinnabar is going to be taken to the moon and Ventricosis is going to die. Ventricosis is lying, but you know. Um, and Phos is empathetic to that. Phos cares. And it shows the difference of Phos later, too, because Phos is willing to do all this risky stuff because Phos cares so much about the people in front of them. And that changes later when they become more apathetic to the people in front of them and instead start becoming more manipulative and stuff like that. It's interesting, too, because what Ventricosis is doing here is taking Phos's care and manipulating it. And that's kind of what Phos does later. I guess Phos learns that a little from Ventricosis. Why would you do this? Anyway, you're too weak to make it there on your own. What choice do I have? Sensei told me focus on what's in front of me. Indeed. This is such a beautiful shot, isn't it? It's so glorious. Another thing I want to talk about while we are now in the ocean is how each setting has a different style, or mainly coloring style, than the other ones. So with the Earth, it's all very harsh blacks. Very harsh blacks, very harsh colors. There is some grays, but for the main part, it's just black and white in an outline, you know? The moon, I don't have one with the moon right now, but the moon, you know, is mainly white. There's very little pitch black. The only pitch black is Karen Gorm's skin, usually, in the moon. And that really gives it to the more moon state. Whereas the ocean is mainly grays. The ocean is like outline, and there's mainly grays, and the little bits of white show the reflection of the water above. And it's so beautiful, and it's so great how the different coloring shows the setting like that, you know? How far is it to your home, Your Majesty? You know, just asking. Not far. More importantly, it is my understanding that you are extraordinarily fragile. Another thing, if the waves dash you to pieces, you may not be able to return home. I think this is Ventricosis showing a little bit of guilt, but also clarifying what has been told to Ventricosis. Because I'm wondering if the Lunarians told Ventricosis that to use against Phos. But Ventricosis mentions a lot that Phos, asking Phos if they regret what they're doing, and Phos is always like, no, I don't regret it. But if you may not be able to return home. I guess that's okay. It is. I feel like this is Ventricosis seeing some guilt with luring Phos this way, and this is when Ventricosis gets some sympathy because Phos is being so kind and so self-sacrificing for Ventricosis, and we all know what happens next. You know, I guess that's okay, and it also shows that Phos doesn't see a need to be around. Like, Phos doesn't see. It's sad because the gems do care about Phos a lot, at least at this moment, and Phos in contrast to Euclid, which I don't remember where the line is. I think here, yeah. In contrast to Euclid, Phos does not mind if they break, and they don't mind if they are never to be found, and because they aren't seen as valuable, and they know that it won't be as bad as if another character, like for example Euclid, would go randomly into the sea and get broken down, because that would really, it's like when the Australian Prime Minister randomly went swimming and then was never found again. Like, that's what would happen if Euclid. Everyone would just be so confused and shocked. But if a random person who didn't have a job or was unemployed did that, it wouldn't make the news. It's like that. Sadly. Yeah, it is. It's true that Cinnabar told me that secret, but my promise was all my idea. So, Phos calls it a secret, and I questioned what Phos meant as a secret for a bit, and this is what I think it is. Phos is saying that the secret part is that Cinnabar is waiting to be taken by by the Lunarians, you know? And that's obviously a very vulnerable thing to say and to tell Phos, like, outright. And Phos sees that as a secret because Cinnabar hasn't told that to anyone else. And Phos feels like they have to do something with that vulnerability that Cinnabar shared. And what they're doing is trying to remedy that by finding Cinnabar a job. A better job. But my promise was all my idea. It's stupid of me to let it weigh me down. So now Phos is sort of thinking about, like, they've never had someone rely on them before. And now they're thinking about, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't let that weigh me down, like someone relying on me. But I can't go back now. I can't forget. And they're talking about, like, I can't forget. I believe this is about, like, I can't forget Cinnabar and I can't disappear. So this is showing that Cinnabar, the relationship between Cinnabar and Phos and the vulnerability that Cinnabar shared has given Phos a purpose to, even though they still are doing risky things and stuff like that, they aren't purposely, they still covered themselves in resin. They're doing something dangerous, but they do intend to come back. And so they're like, okay, like, I can't do this, and so all I can do is disappear. So, hey, those creatures that look alive, do they have death? And so Phos is wondering about that. And it's kind of morbid that it goes from I can't disappear to do they have death? Because I think Phos is curious about that. Oh man. So, yeah. Yes, we do. And then, ventriloquist. The beautiful shell is merely a garment. Our true bodies are made of only flesh. Made only of flesh, ergo they rot away and we die, leaving not a trace. Let us make haste. And, so that's the end of the chapter. And now, instead of ventriloquist is now occupying the above space. So now ventriloquist is now Phos is back to being looked out upon by stuff. But yeah, like, anyway, such good chapter. I especially think, like, the moment in the anime where they talk about death was also really interesting, just because, like, it is interesting how Phos doesn't have a concept for it. And now Phos has a concept for it. And I'm realizing how much this first interaction with ventriloquist really shapes the story. Because this is where Phos, like, learns about manipulation, kind of, and learns about betrayal, and learns about death. Phos learns about all these things that they've never known about, and then they forget it all. But so it's interesting. But a lot of this is also, I guess, towards us, because we know that Phos forgets this information later, or most of it. So a lot of this information that's being said here is kind of to give us insight into Phos's character, and to give us into I also the other race and the humans. So anyway, that is that chapter, and we will go over the next chapter next time. Please give any of your additions to these to this lovely chapter in the comments. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you watching all the way through. And I'll see you in the next chapter.